Welcome to FemLead, the podcast on female leadership and role models. This show aims to inspire and equip you with the tools you need to navigate your career plans. FemLead brings inspiring career perspectives and strategies to guide your path to success. Your host, Alexandra, will interview role models on new, exciting topics with each episode. If you like what you hear, give us a review and subscribe to the show on your preferred streaming platform. Enjoy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Family Podcast. Summer passed. We're now in the autumn season, and as you've probably seen on social media, we passed 10,000 downloads, and it's been 2 years since we are sharing these interviews with you. I cannot begin to thank everybody for being here with us, for supporting me in the beginning with really sharing on my LinkedIn all the updates of FemLead, and for all the support that you have been sharing with me privately, but also on our social media platforms. We've interviewed more than 40 leaders now, and we've shared, I hope, very good advice. I know some of you really write us that it's really impacting your career progression, your career and life in general. And I'm just super grateful that you choose to spend 1 hour every 2 weeks with us and hear news from our super inspiring guests. We do have some more updates. So we are stepping into community building. So we are going to host events in Copenhagen to begin with, where we invite all of you to join. So make sure that you are subscribed to our newsletter, because that's where we're going to share first the news. And of course, we hope that you will want to join us for future events and, build a community of like-minded people. This is what we really want. Likewise, I need to make this update that if you feel your company can benefit from partnering with us, feel free to share what we do and feel free to connect with us. Also, if you think your peers can benefit from hearing from this advice, remember that we are a volunteer community that really spreads through word of mouth. So make sure to share the updates with your family and friends and your colleagues at work, and really help us build this community further, because this is really the basis for how FemLead exists. Thank you again for all of the support and for staying with us for so long. It's really been a pleasure to start this passion project and to see it grow like this. Yes, so now let's move into the topic for today, because I know many of you are just interested to know who our next guest is. And I can say that the quality of speakers just continues to increase. And also, we've had some very, very cool women saying yes to having interviews together. So Nada, our next speaker, is no different. She actually really wanted to share now her professional path and also her advice from many years of working in corporates. She is now at a reinventing point. So in the next 40 to 50 minutes, you will hear a lot of cool advice on how to progress in your career and how to go into entrepreneurship. But without further ado, I want to introduce today Nada Ahmed, who is a public speaker, writer, and innovation and tech advisor with over 15 years of corporate leadership experience in the energy and maritime industry. She is the CEO and founder of Agile Leadership, an innovation consulting company helping startups validate their products and scale. Previously, she has worked as Vice President of Innovation and Transformation at a leading engineering firm in the Nordics. Nada is passionate about innovation, particularly in tech, and loves to help companies think creatively to develop breakthrough solutions. She is also an angel investor in tech startups, and she is a strong advocate of diversity and inclusion, particularly in the tech and investment community. She has her own podcast, Braving Innovation, in which she interviews leaders and shares her own thoughts on topics related to innovation, entrepreneurship, and venture capital. Please welcome to FemLead today, Nada Ahmed. Hello, Nada. It's a pleasure to have you here at FemLead Podcast today. How are you today?
I'm great. I'm doing really well. How are you?
I'm great as well. I'm really excited to talk to you because in our intro call, you spared some great ideas and you have a lot of focus on innovation and diversity, leadership, and I'm sure that the audience can benefit from such a conversation. So I want to start by asking you for us to all clarify what is your professional focus right now? What is it that you are focusing on currently?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I'm focusing on maybe a few different things that I've focused on previously in my career. So I've been working mostly in corporate over the past 15 years, and having had a very interesting career and really being focused on sort of climbing the ladder, and also taking the time to figure out, what are the things that I'm good at. When you're early on in your career, you're just kind of thrown into whatever opportunity you get, and you try to learn and grow. And over time, you try to understand, well, what are the skills that I have, the talents that I have that are inherent? And I realized that sort of 5-6 years into my very engineering job, in which I was working in cleaner energy, I was working in carbon capture and storage, which I really enjoyed because I wanted to work in an area where I brought in my passion. And my passion has always been to do something good for the environment, for the planet, given all the harm that we're doing. And so I started off my career like that, and then I focused it more towards innovation and digitalization, and that kind of happened a little bit by happenstance, and we can get into that later. And that's really where I found my drive, where I could really use my creativity. I learned to use design thinking in the way that we work and really bring that into corporate settings so that we can understand our customers a little bit better. And the industries where I've worked in are kind of these really heavy asset industries, in the oil and gas industry, in the maritime industry. And these are companies that have been around for 100, 150 years. And so really bringing in these new ways of working that we have learned from some of these younger companies, from startups, bringing in design thinking, bringing in lean startup, agile into our work areas. And now what I'm focusing on is, end of last year, I quit my corporate job, and I'm really focusing on building a new career. And if you ask me what my focus is right now, my focus is just learning as much as I can, being an entrepreneur, focusing on building a company in which I'm supporting and helping other founders in helping them grow their company. So over the past 6-7 years, I've been mentoring startups and interacting them with a lot with them. And I want to use sort of my operational experience working in operations in heavy asset industries and help founders navigate not only sort of their relationships with corporate, but also how do they grow? How do they build customer relationships? How do they brand themselves? And really building myself towards more the investor space, so I can support not only startups to become investor ready, but also how I could play a bigger role as a venture capitalist.
Wow, many hats. I'm hearing that you're now juggling with many hats. You said so many interesting things, and I feel that a large part of our audience is interested in really finding the right mix between what they are passionate about, what they can build a career in long term, and also kind of the sweet spot between finding this balance, outside of work, life-work balance that we keep mentioning. When you went through your professional path, you mentioned that at some point you wanted to change careers, and this is currently what the step that you're at. And I would be curious to know what made you decide that, because based on what you've said, your professional path could have continued to just go further and further. And you could have been in many different companies, also in industries that, like you said, they're 100 years old and they will continue to impact the world, right? So what made you want to switch into entrepreneurship?
Very, very good question. I think for the longest period of time, I thought that's what my life was going to be, that success was defined in corporate. I think a lot of people in my generation have grown up like that, but I think the younger generation, the Gen Zers, have a different exposure, and we have a lot more opportunities now. We have a lot more younger companies than we've ever had, and so that opens a world of opportunities for us. Sorry, there's a siren behind me. I'm going to let that go by. And so what made me decide to step out of corporate? I think I call it my mid-career awakening. So having worked for 10, 15 years, having done as I've been told, having followed the rules, I felt like now I was ready to take a bit more risk in my career. people say you should take the most amount of risks like early on in your career, but I think that's hard because you don't know yourself so well still yet. You haven't, you're still trying to prove yourself, not only to yourself, but also to others, and getting that validation and learning those skills. And I think after working for about 8 to 10 to 20 years, you get a bit more confidence on, okay, what are the things that I'm good at? And I think I reached that point where I felt more confident in my abilities and what I can do, that I can make real impact, and that I actually don't need that brand name of corporate behind me to create that impact. And start thinking about the possibility of a life outside corporate. And when I left my job, I wasn't thinking that I was kind of out of corporate, but I just needed to leave to open up my mind to other possibilities. Because once you're kind of stuck in corporate, you think that's it, that's success. But once you kind of step out and give yourself that freedom to think about what you could do, you could potentially create your own company and have that freedom to make it according to your values and make the impact that you want to make in the world.
Amen. I mean, everything you said, it's so on point with maybe the reality of building a career, because I totally agree that when you start your career, you don't know what you want. So there are two ways to see it. One, you just try everything. So you job hop and you kind of try to figure out, okay, what is the industry or what is the role that would fit my skills and what skills I need to develop further. What do I like to do? What am I good at? And then you have the second vertical, if we may say like this, where you already did many different jobs. You established yourself as a professional, maybe in a certain industry, and then you're like, what is beyond this? Like now this can continue for the next 10 to 20 years further until I retire, or I can decide to step out and see, okay, what else is out there for me? Exactly. And this is a point where a lot of people are afraid to, even plan it, because it's like, okay, how dark is it out there? Like how uncertain is it? What was your mindset about doing that? Because I think it will help a lot of people to
no, and I absolutely agree that it is very hard. And for me, it just happened to be where I was in my position. There were some changes being made and I was asked to take another role. And it just felt like a natural decision for me to say, maybe now is the time for me to step out. And in retrospect, I think I'm very fortunate that I got that opportunity where I was like, okay, maybe now I can step on the side a little bit. And when I told people that, because they see me from the outside and they're like, wow, you've achieved so much in your corporate career. Why would you now suddenly step out of it? And especially men reached out to me and they were like, I get what you're saying. Like now is the time for me to take risks too. But I am too scared that if I take a gap now for a year or two, I won't be able to come back at the same level. And I think when someone said that to me, I just kind of realized it's really your belief in yourself. And I had that like deep faith in myself that I will be able to figure it out. And that it's not up to somebody else to give me that position or that role again if I decide to step back into corporate again. It's knowing that you have the network, that you are worthwhile, you have these skills, you're competent enough. And it's a little bit of that insecurity of ours that keeps us from taking that risk, right? Like that fear of the worst case scenario. But what if we thought about the best case scenario and give that a chance? Because we're too often thinking about the worst case scenario. But if you don't give space to the best case scenario, it's never going to happen. So for me, it was like, let me dream a little bit. Let me dream a little bit bigger, because if I follow this path, it's going to be slow and I'm going to end up like all the other leaders that I see around me. And yes, they're happy and they're enjoying their life, but what if there's something bigger? And if I don't give myself that opportunity now to explore that something bigger, it's never going to happen for me.
Absolutely. And the word faith is, I think, sometimes misunderstood to the extent that we forget that most of the things that we accomplish, it's only us. Like it's me accomplishing that situation, obviously with the support system and maybe the right team around, but it's still you that needs to take the step. And if you don't have faith in your own capabilities and you don't have confidence in your own area of success and say, okay, I will be able to be successful in this, then everything else starts to just look very uncertain, in different ways. So it is important to start, like we said, from within. And if we look at the last 5 interviews, they're all talking about this as core to creating a career change, putting yourself first, establishing your own company in a field where you are good to kind of lead and also build companies from there. It's very interesting to hear this from you, because I really see you as a very strong woman with a great presence online. So whenever I look on your Instagram or on your LinkedIn, I'm like, Nada knows what is going on. Like, she's super like on point, right? And this is something that I feel really inspires others. And I'm curious to know if anyone reached out and said that you really inspired them to take this step, because I would definitely see that happening. You also have a podcast talking about innovation, and maybe linked to this, you also said that you didn't necessarily needed anymore the brand validation of companies on your CV. And I want you to tell us, what do you think we should advise people that maybe they will never have this brand validation on their CV? Maybe they will never work for a big company that everybody knows, right? How do we build a strong kind of brand, or how do we build this faith in what we can achieve?
So the first one, in terms of, people reaching out. I mean, when I made this step, you think you're the only one, but when you actually start speaking out and take such a bold step, and I've done it, I did it publicly. I post about it regularly on my Instagram and on my LinkedIn. And there's been an outpouring amount of support, but also people reaching out and saying this resonates. And I'm glad someone's speaking up. And as soon as I put on LinkedIn, I'm leaving my job and I'm joining the Great Resignation, my phone started ringing, and I was in the middle of meetings and people were calling me and they're like, what you wrote there, that's exactly what I'm going through. And a lot of, I think millennials are going through this, like people my age group. A lot of women are going through this, it's the time post, like we can't say it's post-pandemic yet, but like this time of having gone through the pandemic, a lot of people resigned, a lot of people working from home, and the Gen Zers showing us that there's so many opportunities out there that you can have financial freedom from making your own business on YouTube, on Instagram, as influencers, or just from working from home online, right? And this has been happening for the past decade. But I think COVID and working from home really brought it to the homes of people who never thought it was possible, and gave us a lot more opportunities that I don't actually have to go to that office, especially if I'm not. I don't feel like I belong there, right? Because a lot of our workplaces have also been very toxic. And so people got this sense of freedom that they didn't have before. And so when I took this, and then I was encouraged by all these people who reached out that I need to further speak about this, especially for people who feel stuck. I mean, I had people in my team who I constantly had to coach about, having that, like what we spoke about, that belief in yourself, and we don't have to use that word faith if that makes people uncomfortable, but that belief in yourself, because you can't expect other people to believe in you if you don't believe in yourself. You have to believe in yourself first. And then your second question was around a brand. Yeah. So how do you build a brand? And actually, it's to your benefit if you don't have a big brand, because as I've been kind of interacting with a lot of other people, they've been telling me that they don't want to speak out so loudly on LinkedIn and express their views, even if they're thinking about a career transition or they're currently doing a side hustle, because they're actually scared of corporate. And some companies are smart, some big companies are smart, in which they give their employees that freedom to express their views, and they empower them because they realize that strengthens their brand when other people build a brand on top of that. But a lot of companies don't see that and see that as a threat. So people have reached out to me and said, I'm too scared of speaking out because people say, well, you're spending time on LinkedIn, you're not doing your job, or what are you trying to do? You're self-promoting yourself. But that's really an old school thinking today, because when I graduated from college, my senior year was the year that Facebook came out. And now you can start building your brand when you are in college, when you're still studying. You don't have to wait till you graduate. You actually don't even need a degree, because all the information you need to know is available online. It's available through YouTube. You can get access to a lot of information for free, or you can get access at a very, very cheap rate compared to, going to some really expensive college or university. So there's that kind of freedom you have. So whatever area you want to enter into, and that's what I'm doing now. I want to make a name for myself as an investor within venture capital. And there are just tons of information available for you. And you are able to connect with people all around the world, so you can get that real practical experience too. So it's not only just about taking courses, but getting that practical experience and building that brand for yourself. And you build that brand through making sure that your voice gets heard. And you have so many platforms available to you today. So you can choose one of your liking, right? You can use LinkedIn, you can use YouTube, you can use TikTok, you can use Instagram, and start talking about the topics that you feel passionately about. And there's always, I always say this, there's always something that that other people don't, that other people can learn from, even if it's, a little bit more than other people, and you might be thinking, well, I don't have that much experience, but you have other exposure that you're coming with. You might have just graduated from college or not gone to college at all, or you might have grown up in an environment that's completely different from other people. And you're taking the learnings from that and talking about it, and talking about what you're learning from maybe the courses that you're taking online, from what you're reading. There's so much you can read. There are books you can read, there are articles, there are blogs, and people love it when someone can kind of summarize what's going on in terms of technology trends, innovation trends. So I think today, it's never been easier in our history to make a brand and a name for yourself, because everyone's available. Everything is available in your fingertips, and you need to know, what are you going to build your brand around? And making sure that it's an authentic brand that you can consistently present out to people, because it's all about consistency. This with your podcasting also, being able to put out that consistent message, so that I know when I go online, oh, if I want to read about diversity, I go to this person. There's always going to be a post from them on that. Or if I want to learn about technology or the latest in investing, I go to this person. So I would say, now is a great time to build your brand. And why not build your brand, even if you are in corporate, because it's going to award you a freedom that you wouldn't have otherwise.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what a lesson in content management as well, because we sometimes fear that what we share is not necessarily interesting, or like, what exactly am I going to write about? But it's not necessarily about the post itself. It's about what's the mission behind, you wanting to build your brand. Because if you want to become a thought leader, if you want to become in the future, you want to have your own community, then you are the one that needs to start promoting some ideas that you believe in. And then obviously you will find people that have the same connection with you. Like you said, when you shared the news about your resignation and how you want to step into a new adventure, a lot of people wrote you and called you and said, this resonates with me. And I had the same experience posting the podcast. Now that we're discussing, it's been more than 2 years, and dozens of messages about how the interview was great and it gave a new perspective. And this is exactly how communities start. They start from you sharing what you're passionate about. And I couldn't agree more with everything that you've said.
On a word that you use, thought leadership. Some people view a branding with a negative connotation, because they're like, oh, they're just self-promoting. So then I would tell them to think about it as thought leadership, because that's really what you're doing. You're building thought leadership. And who doesn't want more thought leaders? And we need more diverse thought leaders. We need more women thought leaders. And you can do that today.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it doesn't need to be something too difficult like we just discussed. It can also be something that you consistently show up and discuss, and then a lot of people will have some support to share within your network. So definitely agreed. And if you want to check our LinkedIn's, you can see what we post about. We constantly post about something, and we constantly build discussions, and it's just it really works. Like, it really builds a great community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also I would say for people who are not so comfortable posting online or come from like a different generation, social media is all about being authentic and staying away from perfection as much as you can. Because if you come in with the perspective of, oh, every post has to be perfect, it has to be thought through, I have to say something intelligent, then you're not going to post at all, right? So just start with whatever you have, and you're going to get better with time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And on that note, I want to discuss something that's super interesting. What about situations where we have been in, let's say, within the career path or even in entrepreneurship, you've had some maybe difficult or not so good interactions at some point. And then moving forward, you fear that this will follow you throughout your career, because this is something that we also discussed in our intro call, that a lot of people maybe stop planning for something that they're passionate about because at some point they were stopped, or they will maybe not given the opportunity, or maybe they had some sort of feedback that they thought it was negative about their performance, let's say. How do we get out of this space? And I'm really interested in your view on how women see this situations kind of rising and following throughout their careers, because it is a break if you don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I think definitely a question we need to address. I think we women hold ourselves to a higher standard, and the society holds us to a higher standard. So we have to be perfect on all fronts. We are not allowed to make mistakes, and we don't allow ourselves to make mistakes. So when something bad happens to us in our career, it's not only about someone else having done something wrong or we having messed up. It's more about us not being able to forgive ourselves, right? I think that's the biggest thing. So number one would be like, forgive yourself. And you can do that by just saying, I'm not going to don't take yourself so seriously. Can I let go of your ego? You make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes, right? But I have heard repeatedly women hold this, the word reputation at a very high pedestal, and like really feeling like they have to guard the reputation in a way that I feel like men don't have to. When you see these all these other men who are celebrities, who we see like Elon Musk or Steve Jobs, they have pretty ruthless personalities, and they've made tons of mistakes and made blunders and said things in on Twitter and wherever that some people find questionable, but it's okay. It's okay, because there are other things that they're doing that speaks for their influence and impact and power they have in the world. And I think for women, it's harder because it's not only that we hold ourselves to a higher standard, but the society does too. So we're kind of stuck between our own judgments and the judgments of the world. I have seen women are held more accountable. There was a point when I was in forming an innovation board for my company, and we were looking at the composition of our board, and it was very masculine. So we definitely needed more women in there. And every time I would propose a woman to the rest of the board, which was majority men, they would always come up with something that happened that they might have done, that there was something in the news that was just a little bit sketchy. And there was just this trend. And I realized after my 5th and 6th recommendation that every time I propose a woman, there's suddenly something about them that either was in the news or they heard from somebody else that they become a little bit more like, But men, we've had men in the Norwegian business that have served time in jail, that have been like convicted of doing like, unethical things, but we forget about that. They're like, no, but they're very successful entrepreneurs. They can make great money for us. We trust them because, they're also a little bit more familiar with them, right? Like men feel more comfortable with other men. And it's like, having male leaders is more familiar to us because that's what we've had for centuries and centuries and centuries. And women, they're still that misfit today. And so I think there's systematically things have to change for this narrative to change, but I think there's a lot we can do in terms of not holding that against ourselves and forgiving ourselves and moving on and being more fierce in face of such setbacks. Like, bring that fierceness in us, and all of us women have this fierceness. We give birth to kids. That's the hardest thing anyone can ever do, is give birth to a child. And it's about time that we bring that out and face our failures. Like, I have failed tremendously in my career, but they're just lessons you learn from it. It's just a setback, and it's an opportunity to learn and be humble about it. What do I learn from this? But move on. And you can do that by not taking yourself so seriously, and understand that there are ways you have to go, and you're going to achieve that dream career, professional life of yours. And these setbacks are just stepping stones for you to get there.
Absolutely. What a great piece of advice, and overall an overview of all of the different biases that we have, and how we should be aware and not dismiss any situation as, oh, it's just how it is. I definitely agree with you that being fierce is a necessity if you feel that the environment that you're in is not necessarily something that you 100% agree with. It's absolutely okay to say, I appreciate this feedback, I actually disagree, here are my points, and just be a very fierce person that says, hey, this is great, it's going in a great direction, but let's agree to disagree, and let's discuss like ways to move forward together. And I feel that for women it's difficult to come up with this sort of approach to doing business for some reason. Like it's not the first time that I've heard in my group of friends that there's a difficult manager or whatever, like there's just a difficult situation, let's say, and then it's kind of like it's left there, like not necessarily a way to approach it. And I wish that we would help each other more to know that it's okay to be like, I want to figure out how to approach this, how to work together with this person, or how to impact the team in the right way. I'm open to learning that. So how can we do that? Like an open discussion. And yeah, it's it's a topic that we can discuss for hours, but
no, I think that's true. Like, we need to build that support system, a women's support system, and that's why I'm a big champion of just collaboration, because in this masculine environment, we become very competitive, and I've been very competitive, but now I'm leaning more towards collaboration. Absolutely. We will achieve way more, and we will get to higher places through collaboration and not through competition. And then we're going to feel more aligned with who we are, because we're also lifting other women. We're bringing them along. And not only women, men, everybody, right? People of diverse backgrounds, and just bringing people around and really coming with that abundance mindset that there's cake for everybody. There's
absolutely
there's for everybody. And in terms of reputation, I was also going to say that we're also very quick at judging other people, and in some way and not only as women, I think just as a society in general, that, oh, that person had a bad experience, I'm going to check that one reference that I know who works there, and then based on that, maybe not hire that person, and being a little bit more open-minded, because we say we allow failure, or it's, mistakes are okay, but then we also become very picky. If we very quickly judge people too. So let's, stay away from judgment as much as we can and give people a chance, even if they've made mistakes in the past.
Absolutely. And it's also, being kind to one another can go just such a long way. Instead of thinking that, like you said, it's a competition, or if I don't do this now, then this person, or whatever like situation can be, it's energy consuming to even make all of these plans and discussions, versus being like, you know what, I'm gonna collaborate as much as I can here to lift everybody up, starting with this person, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. That I find really hard to collaborate with, but I'm actually gonna put my guard down, stop being competitive, and see how I can help that person.
Yes, very important advice, and also very important life advice when we feel threatened or when we feel uncomfortable, to realize that it's a choice to feel on guard versus feeling, you know what, this is something I can live with, and I'm gonna make the best out of the situation. It makes such a big difference. This is great, Nada. I love it. Amazing, Nada. I mean, everything you've shared so far is super, super. Well, first of all, it's very useful because a lot of people have had questions such as yourself, like, you know, how am I going to see my career progression in 10 years from now? And is this where I'm going to end up, for example, retiring, you know, like what's my setup here? And you also mentioned some very important topics that link a lot with like your next step, which is of course working in venture cap investments and also diversity. Diversity and inclusion is a topic we can discuss in many interviews. So I want to ask you on your view on diversity and inclusion in the investment world. What is your view on, you know, how teams are founded or funded? Why is it important to look at diversity as part of investments? Tell us a little bit about the setup.
Diversity. I think there have been, like you said, articles and articles on this and research on this showing that for a high performance team, you need people who think differently. You want to avoid having that group think mentality where everyone just jumps on the bandwagon because, you know, the big boss said one idea and you just want to agree. Or you all just come from the same, you know, perspective. You've seen the same things in life. And so it makes sense to just go with this idea. And we've seen over and over again, the more different perspectives you have on a certain idea, the better decision you're going to make, the better you're going to be able to forecast the outcome. And I was just reading a book that was actually talking about this, was how they formed these teams and they did a competition on figuring out what teams were better able to forecast. And one of the really important skills those teams who were really good forecasters had was that being able to read views that were different from theirs. So they would have these Google alerts of articles that presented point of views that were different from theirs. And they didn't have really these very hard held beliefs of, you know, being on the right wing of politics or the left wing of politics. They were more willing to listen to different point of views. And then they were also forming teams in which there was also a lot of diversity of opinion. And then they were able to make better forecasts of what's going to happen in the future. And they were making forecasts on a lot of different things. And I feel like in investing, that's basically what you're doing, right? You're taking all the information that you know now and forecasting how this company is going to perform in the future. And there it becomes really important that not only in your investment team, but just people you interact with in general, bring you diverse inputs. But particularly in the team that's making that investment, that you are looking at the needs of different people, especially if you're going to be making products for the general society. 50% of the society is women. And there are also all types of different people that live in the society. So you want your investment team to be representative of the society that you're serving. And that's why we're seeing repeatedly only 2% of women women founders get funding from VCs. Why is that? I mean, one, maybe it's true that we don't have a lot of women founders. We need more women founders. And what's preventing them from taking that step? One of them is also, it's kind of like a loop because there's not a lot of funding available for women, right? And they don't have great role models of female founders having gotten that funding. And then there was a research done by Columbia University on this. And then they saw that when a VC firm was doing due diligence on a company, if it was a female founder, the question they asked them were very different from the questions they asked the men founders. And they often put women in a position that they had to defend themselves. Whereas men, it was questions more about like, what's your vision? Talk about your strategy here and your vision. Whereas women, it was about what hurdles are you going to face? So they're kind of these questions talking about limitations, and then there are other questions in which it's more about your vision, where of course the founder comes out in a good light versus putting a founder in a light where they have to defend themselves. So there are these biases that we have because maybe we don't see a lot of women pitch, or the way that women pitch, right? They might have a very feminine way of pitching that's not very competitive and out there and maybe more humble. Like, it could be a lot of different ways. But being able to look through that and see, okay, look at the hard facts, so that we can get more female founders and also fund products that also serve the female population and just a diversity of candidates. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yes, there are some inherent biases that we have, and we need, and that is one of the reasons why I also felt really passionately about being one of the persons who's making an investment decision, because I know there are not a lot of people like me who make these investment decisions. And then that is just keeping the vicious cycle going, right? So I asked myself, why, when you see this problem, I was like, well, why not me? Why can I not be part of that? People who are then empowering other diverse founders, and understanding, because I come from a diverse background, and this is an important mission of mine. Me being on the table will hopefully allow more people to see that perspective and more funding to go to companies who otherwise would not get funding. And these are companies who are going to become future unicorns and going to make profit for you in the future, but will also have a big impact on the environment, a positive impact. And I know, and we all know this, women leaders tend to make more holistic decisions that are not just based on profit. And we need more of that as we go forward into this world. Not saying that profit isn't important, that yes, of course, we need to also have returns as an investor, but we also want to make sure that it's sustainable over the long run. You're creating a business that's going to survive for hundreds of years and not going to have detrimental impact on the environment and the society.
Absolutely. Where can people find this, let's say, community? Are you leading a community? Is this like maybe an invitation to tell women that are listening to go and find more information on a certain website?
Yeah, so do connect with me on LinkedIn, on Instagram. I have a podcast called Braving Innovation, and I'll be talking about these topics a lot more, especially within investing and within the founders community. I haven't launched a newsletter yet, but I probably should at some point. I have a website. You can visit me. It's called bravinginnovation.com. But just connect with me, as I'm always putting more on LinkedIn on this topic.
This is how I got connected with Nada here, because she posts a lot of cool invitations on LinkedIn, and really exactly what we were discussing earlier, thought leadership posts. And this is a super nice invitation from you, Nada, as well, for our audience to connect. So everything will be in the podcast description, all the links. And I'm sure that people will reach out to share some of their maybe struggles, maybe opportunities, maybe just follow your advice. Super happy that we got connected, and also very good interview. I feel like you gave really straight to the point examples of what we can do to change our careers, change our lives, and go for our passions, but also why diversity and inclusion are important topics to continue to discuss, because we don't see the results of what we've said maybe 2 to 5 years ago, yet we still need to work in this mission. So I'm super, super excited about all the future updates that you're probably going to share. Thank you again for joining us. I would love to go to the final 5 fire questions and hear your advice. And let's start with asking you, what is one book you think everybody should read?
So one book that I seem to have landed on my desk right when I quit my job, it's called The Art of Possibility. And it's written by Rosamund and Benjamin Zander. And I highly, highly recommend it. And it's really about how you can open up your mind to all these possibilities by just thinking differently, reinventing your reality, letting go of your ego, and not take yourself too seriously, and really looking at opportunities in this world. So I would highly recommend that to anyone who wants any inspiration. Just keep it by your bedside, read it every night. Read a chapter, read a page, and it will just inspire you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nada. What is the best piece of advice you have ever received?
So the best piece of advice I ever received is stop focusing on being right, but on getting it right.
Yeah.
And that's about, stop letting go of your ego, especially as a leader, and being like, well, I said this, so I'm going to say that we continue to do that. Because then you're focusing on, like, I need to be right here because I'm the leader. But instead of focusing on being effective, and you can be more effective when you're like, okay, as a team, how can we get it right? Instead of, I have to be right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Tell me now, who is your role model?
Yeah, that was a hard question because I was like, some people have like Mother Teresa or like Steve Jobs. Like, they're people I look up to, like Michelle Obama and Hillary Clinton. But I think in terms of role model, it's people that I know really well who are maybe closer to me, or people who I would serve as role models. And there's this one person here, having worked in Norway now for the past 10 years, that I have really gotten to know really well, is Anita Krohn-Traset. She's an author. She's been a CEO at a lot of companies in the public sector and the private sector. And she's also built a fabulous brand for herself. And she's someone who serves on many boards now. And she's one of those women who is just being fierce and willing to lead in her own way, despite all the negative publicity she might get from obviously being that one woman who shows up in the newspaper, in the business newspaper, amongst all the other men. And of course, there's going to be hate thrown at you, but just being able to navigate that with such grace and positivity, I think she's really been a role model that I will continue to learn from.
Fantastic. Thank you. What would you do if you were to have another career?
That's a good question. I think I'm doing that right now in terms of like reinventing myself. Now, having worked for some years, understanding what my strengths are, using those strengths in the best way possible, I am pivoting from a corporate career to a venture capital career, to being an investor, being an entrepreneur. And that's the other career that I want to have now.
Fantastic. I love that. I love that it's happening. Like, it's not a question that it's right now happening, that you're doing this reinvention and of your career and of yourself. I really love it, and I look forward to hearing all of the updates of the next years. Very exciting. Okay, so the last question is, if you could change places with someone, who would it be and why?
So for this, I thought about Mark Cuban, mostly because that's the space I'm entering into now. He's someone who has a lot of influence, has a lot of money, has a lot of power to invest in companies, and impact the world. So if I could change places with somebody, it would be him, and be sitting in his seat and deciding what companies get funded and will define the future of our world.
Great. That's great. Thank you so much, Nada. This was a super nice interview. I hope you also enjoyed being here with us today. And what do you want to tell the audience before we close the interview?
Yeah, I'm just going to say, dream big and don't let other people's judgments define you. You're meant to do great things, and there is going to be hardship, and there are going to be setbacks. And you might see some other people from the outside and think that they just got lucky, and they keep on getting lucky. But very rarely is that true. Everyone has had some setbacks and downfalls, and take those setbacks as fuel into what you're going to do next, right? It's just a launching pad for you for your big quantum leap that you're going to create. And success is not only incremental, right? You don't have to think about it step by step. You can make some big leaps in your career, but you have to really believe in yourself. So it comes down to that, is staying ambitious, not letting anyone tell you what you can and cannot do, and just going for it.
Fantastic. That's a great way to end this interview. Thank you again, Nada. It was a pleasure. And thank you all for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of FemLead with inspiring role models.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of FemLead Podcast. Share the news with your friends and follow us on social media at FemLead Podcast everywhere.